Four suspects who were arrested in connection to the Janesville shooting this past weekend made their appearance in Rock County Court today. 25-year-old Jason Kaplan was killed during that shooting. Two other people were shot. One person was hit in the head by a gun. Two of the people later turned themselves in. In court today, four of the people believed to be connected were charged. According to attorneys in court today, much of the interaction was captured on video. There was a fifth person believed to be involved. Right now, that person, though, has not been charged. The four suspects were given cash bonds. The four people are also not allowed to have contact with anyone involved in that particular case.